Good morning. I'm Olevs, President of the Baltic Security Foundation.
Good morning. My name is Otto Tabuns. I'm the Director of the Baltic Security Foundation.
Let us greet all who are watching us online. Our expert panelists and moderators from Helsinki to Curitiba in Brazil and from Philadelphia to Riga are ready to provide an excellent discussion today. Especially I welcome our Finnish friends. We consider Helsinki as the virtual host of this event, and we do so in belief that security-wise there are much more things that we can share with each other, and we can rely on each other much more than we do. Today our topic is the Baltic Sea regional security and defense perspectives, which we find rather fragmented. In one way or another, the path shall be found how to succeed with greater coordination and synchronization among the partnering countries across the Baltic Sea. We face more than just military challenges. So we will hear discussions in three relevant security domains as well: cybersecurity, societal security, and economic security. This is the concluding event of the Baltic Sea Security Initiative. Throughout this project, we all are convinced that there are resources, knowledge, experience, and lessons that should be consolidated among ourselves across the region. Baltic Sea Security Initiative has built upon the Baltic Security Strategy Project, which was conducted last year, and this time we take not only broader regional focus, but also bring public attention to the issues of security cooperation among the Baltic Sea partnering nations. Within the Baltic Sea Security Initiative, experts and professionals of the Baltic Sea partnering countries assessed and analyzed the current volume of defense and security cooperation among the Baltic Sea partnering nations, developing recommendations for decision makers in a way to strengthen defense and security cooperation, leading to more coherent defense and security strategy for the region. Our studies focused on four defense and security-related domains: defense, societal security, economic security, and cybersecurity. This project is led and managed by the Baltic Security Foundation in cooperation with Latvian Political Science Association. I would like to thank the Jamestown Foundation and Baltic American Freedom Foundation for their tremendous support and resources they provided making this project possible. Our partnering organizations are the Warsaw Institute, Institute of Central Europe, Lithuanian Defense Academy, University of Federal Armed Forces, Hamburg, BV Consulting, Berlin, Eastern European Security Studies Center, Vilnius Institute for Policy Analysis, International Center for Defense and Security, Baltic Defense College, Texas A&M University in College Station, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Lithuania, and others. Thanks to our great partners and our brilliant experts, many of whom will join us today as active participants of discussion panels. Thank you very much and enjoy our conference.
Thank you very much, Olevs. Now let us give the floor to the President of the Jamestown Foundation, one of our partners, Mr. Glen Howard.
Greetings from Washington. My name is Glen Howard, the president of the Jamestown Foundation, and I have the distinct pleasure of welcoming everyone who is joining us today. The Baltic Security Initiative is a roaring example of Jamestown's deep strategic interest in this ever-important region of the world where American and Baltic interests intersect. The Baltic Security Initiative project is a logical continuation of our previous groundbreaking project known as the Baltic Sea Security Strategy Project, which mainly focused on interoperability and defense and security cooperation among the three Baltic states. BSI, as it is known, represents an integrated strategy for the whole Baltic region that lies in the interest of both the European Union and the United States and strongly complements NATO's collective security capabilities. The Baltic states have arguably been one of the most written about and studied areas of Europe in the last 20 years, and for good reason. These three countries sit astride the fault lines of Northern Europe. No other region has a precarious geographic position, sandwiched as it is between mainland Russia, Belarus, and the Russian Baltic enclave of Kaliningrad. To the north and west lie Sweden and Finland, which describe themselves as non-aligned or independent or NATO partners, but suffer from profound strategic indecision as to what kind of relationship they want to have with the three Baltic states. Their true role in the West and the EU, as well as, and most importantly, NATO membership. To the south lie allies Poland, Germany, and Denmark, which have much to offer in security terms. Further afield lie the mighty United States and the smaller but highly enthusiastic United Kingdom. But all is not well when it comes to the security of the three Baltic republics. Russia continues to dominate the military space in this region, as well as applies non-military forms of pressure or influence, including money laundering and disinformation operations. In order to boost the Baltic states' security, the North Atlantic Alliance has added a small headquarters in each country to facilitate reinforcement if needed, and has brought in forces from other NATO countries, the so-called enhanced forward presence, multinational battalions that train and reside on a continuous rotational basis in each Baltic state. But security cannot be so easily compartmentalized and conceptualized under umbrella terms like the Baltic states. In fact, each of these three countries has its own unique defense challenges. For instance, compared to relatively larger Lithuania, Estonia and Latvia must make do with extremely limited resources for national defense. In any open conflict with Russia, they would need support from NATO. This support could come in following a variety of routes established over land routes, one from Poland through the Suwalki corridor in Lithuania, or from the Baltic Sea. Both are problematic. Recently, discussions have been ongoing about Sweden and Finland stepping into the role of hosting a more secure route for U.S. forces. But this raises a completely different level of discussion for both. Can they still see themselves in a Nordic bloc alongside Norway, or must they now embrace the Baltics and face Russia together with them? Today's conference will seek to openly discuss the complex totality of Baltic Sea security in geographic, social, military, and energy dependency terms. The various panels of experts will hopefully show that despite the huge amount of writing, seminars, meetings, agreements, and political processes already concluded or underway, much hard thinking and painful discussion still remains. I wish you great success in this important event, and I look forward to building stronger U.S.-Baltic defense relations with the Baltic states as the United States transitions to a new presidential administration, one in which the Baltic states will forever remain very strategically important to America's national interests. Take care, and I hope to see you again at another venue.
Now we have the floor for the representative of the Finnish Ministry of Defense, the Director General of the Defense Policy Department, Esa Pulkkinen.
Thank you very much, and very good morning from Helsinki. On behalf of the Ministry of Defense of Finland, I wish you all warmly welcome to Finland, this time unfortunately virtually only. Let me thank the organizers of the Baltic Sea Security Conference for putting together this event and for inviting me to address the conference. The theme of the conference is still the most topical. The Baltic Sea remains vital for Finland, especially for our economy. Approximately 85% of our foreign goods trade is shipped via Baltic Sea, and substantial share of our foreign trade, as well as foreign investments, originate from other Baltic Sea region countries. For that reason, we can state that Finland's welfare depends on the Baltic Sea. The region's impact on our security has also been significant throughout our history, both in good and bad times. Security of supply, including transport connections and production self-sufficiency, has become a key question during the COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic has also demonstrated the need for cooperation on countering hybrid threats. including disinformation. In the long term, it is important to continue strengthening existing partnerships and solidarity in Europe, both through the EU and NATO. The 2020 government report on Finnish foreign security policy, published in late October, roughly a month ago, states that from the great power perspective, Finland is located in strategically important region on which changes in the international security situation are directly reflected. The security in Northern Europe is increasingly interlinked, and any shifts in security situation in the Baltic Sea region, the Arctic neighborhood of Finland, and on the North Atlantic are closely connected. According to the report, Russia has weakened the security of our neighboring areas in Europe by illegally annexing Crimea and by maintaining the conflict it started in eastern Ukraine a few years ago. Russian operations are in areas like in Georgia, Ukraine, and Syria, so that the country has lowered its threshold to use military force. Because of Russian actions, the security policy situation has become more tense, and the EU-Russia relations have deteriorated. Russia is unfortunately still aiming at the sphere of influence-based security regime in Europe. As stated in the report, the impact of Russian power politics are reflected on the Baltic Sea region, where the negative cycle created by Russia has intensified tensions and increased the military activity. The military strategic importance of the region has increased, and more technologically advanced and higher performance weapon systems are being deployed in the vicinity of my country. Russia is raising the readiness level of its troops and enhancing its capacity to rapidly concentrate additional forces to the area. On the other hand, the countries in Baltic Sea region continue to increase their defense expenditure, raise their preparedness, and enhance their defense cooperation. While tensions have grown in the Baltic Sea region, open military conflict is unlikely. The focus has shifted increasingly towards hybrid threats and hybrid influencing. These threats are channeled, among others, through digital world, cyberspace, internet, and social media. They may include influencing election processes or feeding polarization inside our countries. We are looking for ways to strengthen our tools to address hybrid threats. The key is to promote whole of government approach. In Finland, we are also engaging the private sector and the civil society in countering these threats. Besides taking national measures, we have also seen the strengthening of international cooperation over the past few years. We have intensified bilateral dialogue at all levels and in wider fora. Also, we recognize the need and value of transatlantic cooperation for European security and stability, including, of course, for the Baltic Sea region. The foreign and security policy cooperation and defense cooperation between Finland and Sweden has been deepened without any preset restrictions. The objectives of the cooperation with Sweden are to strengthen the security of the Baltic Sea region, as well as the defense capacities of both countries. Nordic cooperation under the auspices of NORDEFCO, Nordic Defense Cooperation Procedure, is being developed, among other things, in the fields of situational awareness cooperation, military mobility, and training and exercise activities. In accordance with the vision set at NORDEFCO, cooperation will be improved with a view to times of peace, crisis, and conflict. The Nordic countries promote the security of Baltic Sea region, also in collaboration with Baltic countries. In a Nordic-Baltic composition, the countries engage in dialogue on international issues of current interests and coordinate their views on international fora. The shared security challenges underscore the importance of this composition. Finland continues in close bilateral cooperation with Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. The increased operations and presence of NATO and the United States in the Baltic countries and Poland have enhanced stability in the Baltic Sea region. The US commitment to European defense is of great importance for the security of the whole of Europe. The US commitment to Europe, both through bilateral arrangement and through NATO, is of absolute key importance. Finland continues to maintaining a close EU-US partnership in the future as well. It is important to preserve the shared set of values based on democracy, human rights, and a respect for the rule of law. Common interests and shared historical set of values support close cooperation. The 30+2 cooperation with NATO and the common security and defense policy of the European Union are pertinent examples of areas where Finland has intensified common efforts. We are aiming for tight cooperation within the permanent structured cooperation of the European Union. Having said this, we also understand the importance and emphasize the need for dialogue with Russia. Dealing with Russia in economic and political terms has always been both natural and necessary for us. There are practical issues between neighboring countries which should be discussed. We should be able to have a dialogue on issues that divide us. There is a place for dialogue even when the US sanctions are in place. And as things stand, the sanctions need to remain in place. For Finland, it is of high importance how Russia positions itself in relation to the United States and China. Finland must be able to assess Russia's internal development and foreign and security policy activities with high accuracy. This requires the maintenance of robust expert knowledge on Russia. Ladies and gentlemen, the Baltic Sea is a European sea and thus a key area for the security of the European Union as well as NATO. The Baltic Sea is of vital economic and security interest for all the countries in the region. It is important to maintain dialogue and find ways to improve the security situation. Stability of the region is in everybody's interest and building transparency is crucial. I'm sure that this conference, by sharing and developing our views and insights on the region, will help us in this task. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Director General Pulkkinen. The Finnish perspective is very important not only for states, but also the international organizations that are stakeholders in our region. Thank you. And now let me give the floor to Mr. Glen Grant for the opening keynote speech.
Thank you. Good morning, gentlemen. And I had to cut a few things out there because my Finnish colleague has just covered them better than I could. So, so thank you. What gives me cause to speak first today about this region? Well, I've spent the best part of 50 years working or living or both in this region, in Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Estonia, Latvia, and Germany. I've worked in security and defense across most of Eastern Europe, including Europe, and most recently in a Ukraine at war. With my Finnish friends, I have orienteered in Ukkola at least 15 times, skied on night tracks all over Finland, and for the last 10 years celebrated New Year in Kokkola, and not somewhere many people know about. I've now been in Latvia for the best part of 18 years. And I've just been given another 10 years residency. This region is now my home. I want it safe. So despite being a lowly retired Lieutenant Colonel, I want to cheat and look at this region as if I was General Ben Hodges, a young, keen 3-star with a new task of defending the Baltic region in some mythical future battle a few weeks away. At the end, he can critique me. So what do I see and think when I sit on the Tallinn to Helsinki ferry every couple of months? I see the Baltic Sea area as a common operational space. But I also see the Baltic states cooperation, Nordic defense cooperation, NATO reinforcement in the Baltic states, US agreements with Sweden and Finland, all as parts of a jigsaw, but missing a common operational picture and focus. I see that we are avoiding the real problem of preparing to actually fight Russia, as opposed to deterring or placating her. I suggest we cannot trust her. And I see this lack of operational coherence as the strategic mistake within this region of this generation. And I would like this 30 minutes to raise some thoughts about this. So why do I say this, and what are the challenges? The Helsinki-based Hybrid Warfare Centre of Excellence characterizes hybrid warfare with 2 points standing out strongly. They are the focus of the enemy upon vulnerabilities and the act of influencing decision-making. We have these vulnerabilities, and they are areas I shall address this morning. What I'm not going to do is to cover Russia, because we all have our own views of how they would attack, what options they have, and everything else. And we've talked about hybrid warfare with them to death in the last couple of years. What I suggest is that the EU and NATO arguably don't take the defense of this region seriously enough. NATO thinks about deterrence with extra troops and about reinforcement or regaining ground after the event, whilst the EU has no visible regional policy at all. Mind, I suggest it has no proper military policy for anywhere. Who pulls the regional strings to respond coherently in the early stages of a crisis is not at all clear. Here in the Baltic region, we have an amazingly rich and diverse cultural and historical space, but this brings its own problems. First, the Baltic states are each totally different animals and unified only by a man-made verbal construct. Just turn that down a bit. Despite hundreds of talking shops and exercises, in military terms, the three Baltic states remain largely nationalistic and separate. Finland and Sweden are living in their own worlds politically and militarily, trying to find powerful friends to help them and to sign bilateral agreements, but without actually joining NATO, hoping, of course, the worst never happens. And we now have EFP countries in the mix, and more of that later. Germany, Denmark, Poland and Norway are in NATO, but are often indifferent and half-hearted about what to do in the region, like buying house insurance, but not a proper fire system. US and UK are enthusiastic and as engaged as they can be, but both know what they should do, but are not quite doing it yet. Thus, regionally, we all have totally different operational concepts, plans and military constructs, and pictures of the challenge and way forward. But some of the vital key parts of this complex jigsaw are missing. International communications at the political military level is one of these. There is no common intelligence or operational cell in the region. So informing EFP troops contributing nations of what is happening, or informing NATO and getting agreement to invoke Article 5 risks a serious chance of misunderstanding and delay. At the political level, I would argue that there is too much complacency, with politicians confusing fine words, papers, conferences, exercises, and forward deployments with real work. So in my view, we have with NATO in the Baltic states a dangerous incoherence, and we need to think hard about it. There is first, no NATO commander for peace and war for the region, and each country is going its own way. The operational focus for Lithuania is towards HQ multinational corps northeast in Poland, rather than towards her two neighbors. This is no surprise. with Kaliningrad sitting where it does like a superating boil on the face of NATO. But the northern two, Latvia and Estonia, look to NATO members Denmark, UK and Canada for support, a completely different direction. In the Baltics, we have 3 separate sets of enhanced battle groups, EFP, and this brings into play over 10 governments and parliaments all over Europe and Canada. This reinforcement really has been one of the real success stories of NATO in recent years. But whilst the reinforcement has done wonders for NATO interoperability and genuine friendship at the tactical level, it also brings its problems. Unlike the old NATO ace mobile force, the troops here rotate far too often and far more quickly than they can learn the geography of the complex Baltic terrain. Suwalki Gap alone would take any commander a couple of years to understand. Estonia in the winter is a totally different country to Estonia in a wet summer. Building battle fighting trust between nations and cultures is again another matter. We also have 3 NATO force integration units, 1 in each state, thus further adding to reinforcement thinking upon national rather than on Baltic or operational lines. And since the NATO summit in Brussels, we can now add to the mix Multinational Division North, with half the headquarters in Latvia and half in Denmark. Today, this is commanded by a Dane, but arguably, this is a half-hearted attempt at divisional command. The commander does not actually command the operational troops in peace. The HQ is not fully mobile, has no divisional troops, and no proper combat communications. How or if it can command in war is a serious point. And the danger of less than operational organizations like this is that they breed a confidence in politicians that should not be there. The idea that EFP battalions can suddenly be reinforced, perhaps to brigade size in times of conflict, ignores the political and operational mess that would come from doing this for countries as far away as Albania, Iceland, Spain, and Montenegro, let alone what reinforcements would do for the organizational coherence and support of the host countries. The reality is that the EFP battle troops, despite their real added strength, lack operational mobility and logistics, and really are only territorial. In the north, there is also no operational reserve if NATO is forced to fight. The US cavalry can and will come, but not until later. So what of Sweden and Finland in the land war? They are currently looking for friends, especially the US. Sadly, neither have joined the EFP troops, but both would gain hugely in political and military terms with allies by doing so. Also, Finland needs to understand, and we recognize they do understand, she may not want to join NATO, but in purely economic terms, she cannot afford NATO to lose. A serious amount of the GDP of the country is linked to countries south of Poland. Germany is the #1 for import and export. The Suwalki Gap is not just for NATO reinforcement, but is also a Finnish economic lifeline. If Tallinn is lost and the Baltic Sea closed for traffic, Finland is in deep political and economic trouble. The relationship with US and UK is growing and important, but if the US is forced to choose between NATO Poland and non-NATO Finland or Sweden, the chips may fall the other way. If Russia does take the Baltics, then land reinforcement across Sweden may be needed for NATO. But even this means crossing the Baltic Sea, which means deploying a strong maritime naval force from somewhere, somehow. The big question is if it is possible to create a level of NATO, Finland and Sweden cooperation for land forces that has reality. Certainly, both countries joining EFP for Estonia and Latvia would be a significant step forward in regional political coherence and alignment and a vast improvement in deterrence. It would also place them morally at an advantage with NATO should they be attacked alone. Giving command of the Division North to a Swede or Finn on the next command rotation would enhance this further. To those who say this is a step too far, I would simply say, try organizing a proper Baltic regional defense after Russia attacks and see how your views change then. And the Baltic Sea space itself is also a challenge. When seen from the viewpoint of NATO or from Sweden or Finland, it is a barrier separating one from the other. NATO is not in a good operational shape here. Despite regular BALTOPS exercises showing the flag, the periods in between are barren. The Baltic states have no navies to speak of and cannot protect their own coastlines or economic zones in anything other than police action. The Polish and German navies suffer from years of chronic underfunding, and readiness for serious operations is shaky. Anyway, they are on the wrong side of Kaliningrad for anything that happens quickly. But we need to remember that when viewed from Russia, the Baltic Sea space is a common battle space for them, linking the two pieces of land. There is no standing naval force in the Baltic Sea since Baltron sadly folded. We also still do not have a complete regional maritime picture. Even if NATO produces this for the region, there will be intelligence secrecy issues with the two northern allies that need to be overcome. This is perhaps an area where again the EU could lead and overcome objections. I suggest that the Baltic Sea desperately needs again a standing naval force with a full-time commander, NATO and or EU led. Alone, each country in the region is vulnerable, but when joined, they are a much stronger fighting match and thus deterrence for the Russian Baltic fleet. The two most capable navies in the region today are with Sweden and Finland. And I suggest that a commander for a standing force should come from one of these countries, despite possible objections that might come from some NATO countries. This would tie both countries to NATO in a substantial way, and the reverse. Also, we need a naval Schengen-type agreement in the Baltic, where NATO and allied navies can use each other's ports freely, with pre-agreed diplomatic requirements and payments only for utilities. Again, this is an area where the EU could lead the coordination and do something positive. But a bit faster, please, Brussels. The defence of the airspace is also weak and discordant. The Baltic airspace has been managed since 2004 with air policing from other countries. I take pride in having been a key driver for this. At the time, it made me no friends in the UK Ministry of Defence. They were short of money. But this operation is policing, not air defence, and would likely need considerable agreement to change. Hopefully, there is already a politically agreed plan by NATO. The change to air defence and to reinforce air forces if Russia attacked must be in minutes, not in hours. And the closest air forces are Poland, Sweden, and Finland. Poland still has maintenance and reliability issues for F-16. This means that NATO and EU both need Finland and Sweden to play a bigger role than now. This could be inviting them to co-partner in Baltic air policing, or even to take a slot alone. It would make sense also to create an air Schengen, opening up the Baltic airspaces of Estonia and Latvia completely to their two northern neighbours. Again, this would be a strong card for the EU to play. But air defence cannot be an Air Force issue alone. Air deniability for all countries against enemy air, and especially now drones, is a win or lose issue. Russia is learning and developing her abilities quickly, whilst NATO countries, and arguably Sweden and Finland, lag behind with the drone challenge. 1970s type fighting has passed. Budgets must be changed, and changed quickly, to bring drones fully into the flight, and not just one or two. Armenians found that they could not strike the Turkish-built drones flying at 8 kilometers high in any effective way without firing expensive air defense missiles. There is no value for money in that. We need a new response for this threat, and possibly this is an area for US money granted by Congress to help allies. In conclusion, there are many who suggest that because of the exercises and vastly improved EFP interoperability, in a crisis, all will be all right on the night. I disagree completely. Without a single NATO commander for the Baltic region, and without fully engaging the EU, Sweden and Finland openly and politically, we will stay unbalanced in operational discord. The current NATO response may appear fine as a deterrent posture and for nice to have cooperation, but it is a total pig's mess if people must fight. NATO leadership is still not supporting change to the command and control arrangements in the pre-conflict stages. This is further reinforced by NATO HQ informally accepting the battle space to be split into two divisional areas, but without formalizing the command and control arrangements, nor giving them a proper battle headquarters. NATO moved towards an EFP deterrence posture that reinforces differences of countries with 3 separate EFP headquarters and channeled EFP allied contributions to individual countries rather than supporting the region as a whole. It is in the pre-conflict stage we are vulnerable to hybrid actions. The lessons from Ukraine about political centralization of command being too slow to match Russian actions have not been properly addressed. The NATO structures now put in place make it near impossible to get the needed interoperability and proper military cooperation across 3 countries. NATO and contributing allies also need to grasp that cultural uncertainty avoidance equally affects political level decision-making as much as military. Politicians need plans and prior direction as much as military chiefs if they are to be effective. The current NATO posture actually creates overconfidence on one hand because Baltic politicians think something effective is being done, and instability and uncertainty on the other when they realize they still don't know what to do next in a crisis. This discord will likely contribute to a decision-making failure at the highest levels of the 3 states and maybe allies unless taken seriously. The logical step is to take reality and reshape it. In the first place, at the military political level, split the battle space into 2 with clear NATO divisional boundaries between Lithuania and Latvia. Give the task of keeping open the Suwalki Gap and fighting Kaliningrad firmly to a Polish division using the available US ground support. Accept that in the short term, US armor is unlikely to traverse the Baltic Sea and either will need to come overland from Poland. In this case, keeping the Suwalki Gap open is vital to this task. Or across Sweden, when a lightly opposed Baltic crossing will be needed. Neither is a happy task. The Northern Division should be made up of Estonia and Latvia and commanded by Denmark, or even Sweden or Finland. It should be accepted by NATO that the Baltic deployed troop contributions are too small to do anything other than defense of capitals, key ports and airfields. Any more is flying in the wind, and even these tasks may be too much. Possibly to improve flexibility, the EFP contributions should be pooled and a reserve brigade created. This could be commanded alternatively by UK and Canada to be used as needed. This will create greater deterrent uncertainty and increase the divisional force capability in terms of operational mobility. The ESDP contribution must try to tie the division into a single battle space with Finland and Sweden. This is important because in any Russian attack, the air bases in Estonia and Latvia are likely to be untenable because of extremely limited air defense cover. Bases in Sweden and Finland would be needed for NATO air reinforcements. Both countries must be encouraged to contribute to the forward defense in terms of ground and air and to take responsibility for sea access. It should be considered that the new divisional HQ should also include Finns and Swedes on the staff. This will be a considerable political ask for both countries and would need a two-pronged political approach from both NATO and the EU, not to mention bilaterally from the US, and a huge strategic communications plan for both countries. But asking the Finns first to command the division would be taken extremely seriously by them and would seriously upset the Russians, not to mention my Swedish friends, of course. If Finland refuses command, Sweden would get it, so they won't refuse. This may provide the tipping point needed to get both countries to take full cooperation with NATO seriously. Again, doing this would greatly enhance the deterrent effect, but would also create greater military coherence for what is a much more complex battle space than just Estonia and Latvia alone. NATO needs to focus hard upon the overall command processes and structures and the actual fighting and support structures on the ground used by the countries in the early crisis stage. Reading the excellent Estonian ICDS report on this subject from my former colleague Tony Lawrence would help anyone get an understanding of the NATO fault lines, at least. Then there needs to be a greater focus upon the pre-Article 5 stages of political decision-making in how all three countries interact in cooperation with each other, with NATO, and with non-NATO allies. On the surface, it appears that there is too much left to chance, especially with uncoordinated bilateral cooperation. What I see as most important is that the knee-jerk response to create deterrence has created a military monster for NATO that is increasing the military capabilities of the three states, but in an incoherent military way. It serves to weaken the political aspects of cooperation and interoperability by seemingly proving a solution for war. It does not. This solution has not taken the political, military, and cultural realities into full account, but simply assumed a set of conditions that are in fact absent or worse, and totally different from those imagined. The region now needs a hard restructuring to concentrate not on deterrence, which is not a military task, by the way, but upon war fighting. This needs more serious thinking. So I summarize. We need a full-time, three-star regional commander from NATO. We need Finland and Sweden on board in every possible way. And we need to reshape deterrence towards war fighting. Thank you, gentlemen and ladies.
Very much, Glenn. Thank you for giving the main points of what the issues are defense-wise. And I think it is also very important to note some of the sectors that would require additional attention, such as the maritime domain and the airspace. And as we can see, this is a very complex jigsaw, which is the reason why we will have an additional panel, which will follow shortly with regard to defense issues.